Welcome, everyone. My name's Amanda Septimo. I'm an Assemblywoman who represents the South Bronx, the 84th Assembly District. I'm sitting because I want this to very much feel like a conversation. This is an important conversation, and we want the audience to be just as involved as the panelists. And so we're going to keep it feeling like a conversation. And so today we're having a discussion on HUD Section 3 and the power of Section 3 as a tool for economic empowerment for public housing residents, both in Puerto Rico and New York City, two of the places in the country with the highest concentrations of public housing. Before I continue, I do want to acknowledge my colleague, Councilmember Diana Ayala, who also represents the Bronx and East Harlem. Any other electeds? No, okay. Thank you for being here. Deputy Speaker, you're right. Yes, there's so many illustrious titles to keep up with, but yes, Deputy Speaker, Councilwoman Diana Ayala. So just a brief history. Also, I'm sorry, before I continue, I want to pause and ask everyone to give a massive round of applause to Lee Yambelis, without whom this panel would not be what it is. I know we're in for a treat today. We have an incredible set of panelists, expertise in the room, and Lee has done so much to pull this together. So thank you, Lee. We really appreciate it. So a brief history on Section 3 for anyone who might not know what it is. Section 3 of the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968 was part of a package of civil rights laws passed to address civil unrest after the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King. And the goal to enact Section 3 was to mitigate the problems of high unemployment, targeting specific economic opportunities generated from HUD's investments in communities across the country. So we know that HUD spends a lot of money. And the point of Section 3 is to make sure that when that money is spent, it's targeted to provide opportunities to local residents within those structures. And this today, as we focus on sort of workforce development and the strategies that we're working on to make sure that we're training today's labor force for tomorrow's work, we're wanting to talk about Section 3 as an opportunity and as a tool to unleash that economic power. Today, our goal is to really talk about how we can build a stronger and more equitable set of communities by using the power of Section 3. And that is really refining the operational perspective of what is meant to be a really great program and has the power to really transform how our communities work from an economic perspective, particularly when you're thinking about public housing. And so I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists, who are all incredibly knowledgeable about Section 3 in one form or another and who have incredible backgrounds. But my introductions of them will be brief because I would spend all day talking about their expertise if I could. But I will be brief so that we can get into the conversation as soon as we can. But I want everyone to know that their complete and very impressive bios can be found on the QR code found on the SOMOS and Legal Skills Center websites. And thank you to the Legal Skills Center, who is also a co-sponsor of this panel. Just a bit of housekeeping. Each speaker will have about 5 to 7 minutes to speak. And then we will leave time at the end for questions from the audience. And, for the speakers, I'm excited for you to sort of launch in. We will be keeping track of time just to make sure that we have space for the conversations. You'll get notice when you're at your halfway point and when there's 1 minute left and then when it's time to wrap up. And any speaker PowerPoint presentations or anything like that can also be found on the Legal Skills Services Center website as well as the QR code. And so, without further ado, I want to say we have with us William Rodriguez-Rodriquez, who's the Secretary of HUD. He is not here yet.
No, but I'm representing him.
Oh, great.
But no worries. My name is Martinez. I'm the Disaster Recovery Deputy Secretary for the Department of Housing.
Here in Puerto Rico.
And I'm here in Puerto Rico. So I'm representing the Secretary that he had to attend to another event.
Well, thank you for being here.
Of course.
I'm biased, but I'll always say when we have a woman in place of a man, it doesn't feel like a loss, right?
Touche.
Sorry, boys.
As they say in the Bronx, you go, girl.
Yeah, right. Okay, we're also joined by Michelle Perez, who's the Assistant Deputy Secretary of the Office of Field and Policy Management from the Housing and Urban Development from HUD headquarters down in D.C. We have Roberto Perez Santoni, a.k.a. Papo Cristian, Puerto Rican-based social justice and public housing advocate, the gentleman who will be speaking in Spanish. Sergio Paneque, who's the Chief Procurement Officer at NYCHA, who's joining us via Zoom today. We have... There he is. It's a great background. We've got Adolfo Carrion, who's the commissioner of the New York City Housing and Preservation Development, but has done a lot of great work at HUD in the past. We've got Clem Richardson, an award-winning journalist and expert on Section 3. Clem was... Oh, he's in the audience. All right. Well, he's blending in. And Manny Martinez, resident council president for South Jamaica Houses and district chair for the Queens South District Council of Presidents, who's also here. Thank you for being with us. Yes, I also have to shout out my public housing residents who are here, made the trip from New York, many of which are from our districts. So grateful to have you all here, grounding the experience and keeping us present and honest on what we're working on. So with that, housing in Puerto Rico, we'd love to start just kind of hearing about how the experience works here with respect to Section 3. What are the ways that you think operationally it could be improved? And we'll kind of continue from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello. Thanks for having me representing the secretary. So a little bit of a background. I'm leading the Disaster Recovery Funding Office in Puerto Rico after Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Puerto Rico was devastated. But we received an amount of funding that it's been managed at the Department of Housing of Puerto Rico, where we have an office dedicated specifically to Section 3 to educate not only the general public, but our contractors. You can imagine we are managing over $20 billion in disaster recovery funds. So there's a lot of contractors working out there that need to comply with Section 3. So we are educating contractors. We are educating general public. And we have different programs that those Section 3 profile participants can benefit of. So we've had over almost 7,000 events on education for Section 3. On our platform, we have those templates so people can go. It's very user-friendly, so people can go and auto-certify themselves as Section 3. And we also educate them on the other programs that we have that, of course, are focused on low to moderate income participants so they can also benefit. So what we are looking for is to educate and have people know and understand that Section 3 exists and the benefits of it, having them certified, and then if they're not trained, if they have no jobs, we can guide them into workforce training programs that we have, which are, free of cost. And then we connect them with our contractors that, of course, they need to comply with Section 3. So it's a double whammy there. It's a win-win situation. There's a lot of work still to be done because we know that there's still a lot of people that don't know about Section 3. But there's a huge benefit. And I'm super proud to say that 40% of my team, and we are almost 500 employees in the office that I'm leading, are Section 3 participants. So many of them are being certified. Of course, they have a job, and many of them are also benefiting from a very important program, which is the Home Buyer Assistance Program, where we are giving grants up to $60,000 for the closing and the down payment. So I have people that didn't have a job that now are certified under Section 3. Now they have a trade, they have a job, and they are getting their homes. They're getting benefits on this program and having their own homes. I'm super proud of being able to make that difference in Puerto Rico. And of course, my team that has done a great job.
And And I think that speaks to the incredible power of the program, right? When it's used, when you really harness this power and it's used as a tool, there's so much that can come of that in terms of transforming people's lives. I also realized when I was speaking, I didn't actually define Section 3. So for anyone who might not know what it means, it basically is a component that makes it so that anyone who receives any HUD funding has an obligation to go as far as they can. It's the language is to the greatest extent possible to provide contracting, training, and employment opportunities to individuals in low and very low income communities, and to prioritize folks who are local residents of public housing specifically. And that is really critical for reasons I will let these expert panelists talk about. So I'm going to turn it over back to you guys.
Well, hi, everyone. Good morning. It's afternoon, no? Afternoon.
You never know over here.
It's gone so fast. I am Michelle Perez. I am the Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Office of Field Policy and Management at HUD. The reason why that matters is because my job requires me to oversee the 64 field offices of HUD all across the country. So I work with the regional administrators, the deputy regional administrators, and the career staff who work in the 64 offices to really be the front door to HUD. Because generally, HUD, there are very few indoors that you can knock on and know how to walk in through the door. If you have a fair housing complaint, you can call FHEO, the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. If you have a concern about an FHA mortgage, you can call the FHA Resource Center. But if you need anything else at HUD, you don't know necessarily who to call. And the truth of the matter is, you don't have to, because it's my job and my office and the people that I work with's job to find out from you how we can triage, how we can support you, and where we need to direct you, whether it's inside of HUD or outside of HUD through other federal agencies. My background, I think, is worth noting. I actually have about 24 years of civil service in the government. So it means that this is my first go-round as a political appointee. I've never before been a political appointee, so I'm an interesting unicorn, I think, a little bit, because I know where government has worked, where it has not worked, where it can bend, where if you bend too much, it might break. And I've worked starting in 1999 in the Clinton administration is when I met that guy over there, Henry Comas. So I've come into government with an idea of how do we make it work for community? How do we make it more accessible? How do we make it more equitable? I'm from Miami, Florida. My mom's from Haiti. My dad's from El Salvador. And that has a very personal meaning in the work that I do here. I see Haiti's in the house. What? Okay. So I'm starting this condensed conversation to invite a discussion around several principles of why I joined the political administration. That, I think, has to center this conversation. On the first day of President Biden's, the day after inauguration, he issued an executive order that's maybe not commonly known, but I want to read to you the name of it because it's actually very relevant to this conversation. It was an executive order specifically to HUD, and the name of it was Redressing Our Nation's and the Federal Government's History of Discriminatory Housing Practices and Policies. On day one, there was acknowledgement and a recognition, the fact that the federal government was complicit in many of the discriminatory and racist policies that created a situation that we're in today, which is what then makes the Section 3 program so critical, so necessary, so important. I am leading the agency in drafting and submitting an equity action plan. There was the first executive order issued, now a second. You'll hear more about that in the coming months ahead when all of the federal government agencies were in fact asked to develop an equity action plan and specific metrics and outcomes to track performance against it. Because it's not just in name only, it's something that we have to be transparent and honest about what we're doing and in what ways we're moving the ball forward and where we're not. December of 2021, President Biden issued another order, and this one spoke to me personally. In it, the government must be accountable for designing and delivering services with a focus on the actual experiences of the people whom it is meant to serve. And I think that's another relative connection to the Section 3 program. How are we designing and delivering the expectation of the Section 3 program, and what job is HUD doing to facilitate the cities, the counties, the housing authorities to be able to deliver it to the greatest extent practicable, right? It's not simply a line in the ground that we sit and we say, just climb above it, but how do we reach into? I mean, you'll hear more about that from HUD with affirmatively furthering fair housing. We're working on pushing that forward as well. You'll see this element of our programs, Justice 40 in the Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This is one example, CDBG-DR, disaster recovery, where you saw a lot of money, but I'm saying to you that this is a massive commitment of the administration to do this once in a generation investment of dollars to build out infrastructure, to build out bridges, roads, water systems, to abate lead in housing. This is a lot of money that we're seeing that we've never seen before. And how do we capitalize on it? And what we've seen already, many researchers have said that today, if we were to try to spend all the money with all this funding made available, we would not have enough workers to be able to accomplish the mission of this. Again, another compelling reason why Section 3 matters. Oh, I jumped ahead, sorry. Next slide, next slide. So all that to say, worker empowerment and worker organizing is, that's where I am now. There, thank you. We were asked to participate on the task force on worker organizing and worker empowerment to talk specifically about the 1968 Section 3. The question is how? How do we do it? There's the spirit of the law and there's the letter of the law. And I would say to you, in working with a lot of our grantees with the change of the new rule, it's not just counting one person worked and I met that goal and that's the end of it. We actually changed the requirements so that we're counting labor hours. Labor hours, which speaks to more than just saying I hired someone to clean up a site one day and I don't need to hire them anymore, but how am I growing to up to 25% or more of the workforce to contribute to those labor hours. This is a whole new way of thinking, and I'll tell you honestly that this was a major change in response to community input, worker advocates input, that it was insufficient to simply count the number of people. We needed to count the number of hours, which is not so different than the way we administer the Davis-Bacon program, which enforces the payment of fair wages. Outreach and awareness, compliance and enforcement. Those are two areas that I expect that we're going to have a lot of conversation about, and I welcome it, I invite it. I am working with the field offices, with advocates and allies. We're asking state job training programs, Section 3 businesses we've had, and residents. We've been working with the National Low Income Housing Coalition, with the National Tenants Association to say, what can you tell us about Section 3? Secretary Fudge has been on record saying, I want to hear from you about how it's working and how it's not working, and she's charged my office and the leadership of my office around the country to have these conversations so we can think through what works, what doesn't work, and in fact, what the challenges are.
I'm going to jump in there on time,
Sure.
but there's so much more to come back to, and I'm sure we're gonna circle back, and I'm going to continue down the line. Adolfo, you're next in the hot seat.
Okay, thank you, Assemblymember. Again, my name is Adolfo Carrion. I'm the Commissioner of Housing for New York City. All of this stuff sounds so familiar to me from my many roles that I've played over the years, and I'm encouraged to hear Michelle sort of very clearly, lucidly, and intelligently breaking it down for us, because I have to tell you, for me, if we were to reduce this conversation to kind of very basic English, what we have here is a failure to communicate. There is a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority of people who know what the hell Section 3 even means. It's government speak, not English. And so part of the tall task we have is to take all of this stuff and break it down. We have a similar issue in New York City where I'll bring up this local state law, 421A, like, insider talk. Nobody knows what the hell it means on the street, right? Every elected official knows what it means. Every developer knows what it means. A few advocates know what it means, But for the most part, it's not even in the English language. It's just 3 numbers and a letter, and people parade around talking about it. So we have a branding problem that I think we need to address right away. The New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development is the housing agency for New York City, charged with developing affordable housing, preserving affordable housing, keeping housing safe, lead-free, other toxins-free, working in partnership with the host community, the city of New York, and all our residents. And a lot of people don't know this, that 80%, more than 80% of our budget is from the federal government, from, in particular, HUD. More than 80% of New York City Department of Housing Preservation and Development's budget is from the federal government. So we're one of those. There are 2 public housing authorities in New York City. One that everybody knows, the New York City Housing Authority, or NYCHA, and then there's another one, which is the Department of Housing. We administer Section 8 vouchers, we use home funds, we administer community development block grants to the tune of billions of dollars. So we are one of those entities that are the recipients of these 1968 Section 3 funds. The easier side of our work is on the new construction side, because it's a lot of money, so we don't have to worry about that $200,000 minimum threshold of receiving funds. So that we've been able to oversee the development and maintenance of hundreds of jobs. Every year, there's a few hundred extra jobs. The last cycle was 233. The cycle before that was 160 jobs. The cycle before that was 183 jobs. Still not enough, because it's not enough of a share of the development that's taking place. Where we have difficulty is working with on the procurement side. These are the goods and services that we consume as an agency, the contractors that we hire. We hire contracts to do emergency repair work. There's some developers here and builders and other folks who know about this stuff. We have contractors that we send into buildings to remove lead and abate lead. And these are contracts that are relatively small. So we want to work in a better way with HUD to figure out, might we want to lower that threshold of a couple of $100,000 to maybe 100 or 50? Because we have a lot of our Section 3 businesses, low-income business owners that can't take advantage of this program. So we have that disconnect, and then we have the disconnect of people just not knowing that this is available, where to get it. So what I say on behalf of New York City and on behalf of HPD, Housing Preservation and Development, is we want to expand the education portion of this. Yeah. We're a willing partner to tell the story that this is available and people need to take advantage of it, so we can hear that story that we hear from Puerto Rico, where somebody gets training, gets a job, secures a career, borrows money and buys a home, and jettisons their family, or launches their family, I should say, launches their family into a successful future. That's what we should really be all about. So,
amen.
Looking forward.
Amen. Thank you for that. We're going to continue down the line. Manny, please take it away.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Manny Martinez. I'm a resident council president in Queens. I'm also the district chair for the Queens South CCOP district. CCOP is a jurisdiction-wide resident council, which means it's the collaboration of resident councils who come together to then discuss and put input into housing policy for the housing authority. Housing policy that also includes Section 3 and how that is supposed to apply and best benefit our 330,000 population of residents that we represent. We have some significant issues with that. Now, New York City Housing Authority is the largest housing authority in the Western Hemisphere, which means Canada, United States, and Mexico. And so the amount of funds that this particular entity has and the amount of redistribution that they engage in, it's complete opposite. So there's a New York City comptroller who did an audit on NYCHA who identified that between 2010 and 2020, NYCHA expended $19.8 billion in contracts. Not every contract is a Section 3 contract. Most are. But even if we were to cut that in half, 50% of that, $10 billion, would mean that under Part 135, before the changes were made, there was a 10% mandate for Section 3 business concerns to be given 10% of the contract value in subcontracting. NYCHA did 0%. So that means that in that decade, we lost $1 billion in business development equity that would have changed the face of the New York City Housing Authority. We're looking at a big dichotomy in these entities, where you have the policy side, and then you also have the administrative side, where they're starting to re-legislate through administrative bureaucracy, where they are starting to block you and neglect you and forget that you exist based off of some policy that doesn't exist. And because we don't have the access, not even at the jurisdiction-wide level, to talk to HUD outside of the administrative part, because we get caught up, even now, we're caught up in the administrative part of HUD that does not allow for our complaints to be heard. We have been muted. And so when they say that NYCHA is failing with all of this money, despite the administrative executives earning 40% of the salary, out of $1.4 billion a year that they pay in salaries to their 10,000 staff, this executive bloated staff who keep adding on positions that do nothing at 6 figures and it's weighing heavy. And so now we have an opportunity, despite the federal cuts that's happening at Section 9, which is what public housing is, which they fund operations and capital, in the tune of us being collaborative partners so that we can be able to take over, do resident management and be partners and do things to redistribute, where our rent would be more than sufficient to account for the deficiency in HUD funding. Where in 2018, at I believe roughly 50%, 60% rent collection at an average of $500, close to $600 in rent, there was $1 billion that was collected in that year. And that can be evidenced in the council records. If we were to do a flat rent goal of 40%, meaning that 40% of the households are paying flat rent, we wouldn't need federal funding, and we would have the protections of Section 9. Moderate income, which is the only middle-class income protections that our Black and Hispanic communities have in any city. And so what we need to do now, because they say that, I've heard this saying, and I think it's wrong when they say knowledge is power. The proper application of knowledge is power. We have to understand what our rights are, what they say, who is in front of us, and be able to engage. I want you to remember that the only reason that we have Section 3 now is because after they killed the Honorable Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, we burnt down 150 cities. The only reason we have Section 9 the way it is now, because back in 1969, we didn't have 25% of the subsidy, now it's 30, right? They were abusing, they were charging, housing authorities were charging more rent to the households than they were receiving. They would get $120 in welfare and charging them $160. So they went on a 9-month rent strike and got Section 9, the Section 9 that we have today. So we need to understand our path, our past, so that we can see the path forward. This is ours. Section 3 was earned. We spoke, they responded, and now they're trying to re-legislate through administration and not give us a penny.
That's right. I'm going to stop you there.
Thank you.
He's preaching. I didn't want to jump in there.
I thought I had 7
Gonna
minutes. I still got
stop
1:30. I still got
My
1 minute
staff.
30 right here.
My staff in the back.
I still got 1 minute 30, but no problem.
The
I got
timekeeper
you.
in the back. It's above my pay grade. Okay.
The timekeeper back there.
Okay. But thank you for that. No, and we'll come back to each of you because you're each saying so many incredible things that I want to pull out more.
Scary to a lot of people, believe it or not.
Amen to that. Okay, so now we're going to continue with Papo Cristian. Le toca a usted.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias a usted.
Bienvenidos a Puerto Rico. Welcome to Puerto Rico.
Thank you.
Puerto Rico.
Le agradezco a usted, señora Septimo, y a Lilian, aunque ahorita tenía un poquito de coraje en términos de la organización, y lo tengo que decir porque yo no escondo mis sentimientos ni mis emociones. Hay que ser honesto, claro y transparente. Y les paso a ustedes algo, si están trasladando ahí, la existencia de los departamentos de la vivienda estatal y federal se deben a que nosotros existimos. Ellos existen porque nosotros existimos y están ahí para trabajar para nosotros y trabajar en armonía y en paz y con decencia y con honestidad. Porque esto nos afecta a todos nosotros, tanto en el estado de Nueva York como en toda la nación. Y hay unos bandidos y unas bandidas. Hay unos bandidos y unas bandidas que están en HUD y en la vivienda pública y no implementan esto, lo ocultan. Nos dicen, parece que nos están haciendo un favor. Y les recuerdo que esto viene de la sección 3. Y recuerden ustedes que en la nación hubo 20,000 problemas. Cuando se dan cuenta que hay pobreza, que hay racismo, que hay clasismo. Entonces es que implementa la sección 3. Pero qué bueno, porque son oportunidades que nos dan. Y escribí, pero mis experiencias con la sección 3, yo pensaba que aquí en Puerto Rico era que te hacían el favor de los que te administran en el Departamento de la Vivienda de darte un trabajo. Miren, en mi vida, y lo hablaba nunca, y miren que he cogido talleres con Vivienda, con los privatizadores, pero nunca nos hablaron de la sección 3. Y hacen algunas cosas buenas, porque hay que aceptarlo. Paréntesis. En la vida tenemos que hablar claro y transparente y decir las cosas como son. Sin ñe, sin tapujos, aunque le caiga el sello que se lo ponga.
I'm going to translate a more condensed version, but he's been an advocate for many years, has been fighting relentlessly, has talked about how he's been the recipient of jobs, he's seen other people make it work, and you have to give credit where it's due, but that there have been many, many, many opportunities where people are helped and are simply treated as if they are being done a favor. And that in all of the times encountering programs with HUD, there has never been any conversation about Section 3 and its availability.
Mi censura a todos ellos y ellas, y me refiero a las autoridades estatales y locales y a los que les pagan para que nos administren, porque nos han ocultado información de la sección 3 que es tan importante, que se pide la colaboración de la comunidad y se le indica en los reglamentos de HUD y no nos llaman y no nos dicen, como si nos estuvieran haciendo favores. Y el gobierno ha implementado ese dinero pues para ayudarnos, para mejorar nuestra calidad de vida, para que seamos independientes económicamente, para que levantemos a nuestra familia, a nuestros hijos. ¿Y sabe lo que me duele, señora Septimo, de que está allá en la Asamblea de Nueva York? ¿Cuánta gente conocemos que han muerto, que están presos, que no se les dio la oportunidad de desarrollar sus destrezas de trabajo por los bandidos y las bandidas que a veces nos administran? Que entonces nos sirven muchos títulos muy finos, muy sofisticados, pero no tienen corazón. Y hay que tener mente y corazón y un sentido de humanidad para ayudar a la gente pobre de Puerto Rico y de los Estados Unidos y del mundo. Hay que tener humanidad. Y la sección 3, gracias por invitarme.
Claro.
La sección 3 es importante.
Gracias.
Y hay que pelear por esto.
So voy a traducir, gracias a usted. He talked more about, again, how this is a really important program and it needs to be shared with people, and how the people who are working in HUD and administering this work have a lot of titles, have a lot of power, have a lot of responsibility, but are not meeting their commitment to helping people who are poor. And how it brings him great sadness to think about all of the people who have died over the years and who never had an opportunity to improve their life, their station in life, that of their family, of their children, because they weren't given access to a program that they should have access to. And he said, this is important and we need to keep fighting for it.
En una sociedad disque democrática, liberal, capitalista, es una falta de respeto y un atropello y un crimen que no ayudan a los sectores más marginados del país con herramientas tan importantes como la sección 3. Esto es una herramienta súper importante. Esto hay que pelearlo bien duro. Carrion, que yo lo conocí a usted cuando estaba allá en los Washington, D.C., con los pinches hand cream. Pero yo lo conocí aquí en Puerto Rico como una actividad que usted vino. Que no me dejaron hablar. No me dejaron hablar por la maldita politiquería en este país. La sección 3 haga que la implementen las autoridades estatales que hacen cositas que son buenas. Porque hay que decir lo bueno y lo malo, pero hay que implementarla más. Tenemos que pelear por la sección 3 para que desarrollen nuestras comunidades, para que nuestras comunidades echen para adelante, para que seamos buenos ciudadanos. Tanta basofia y tanta basura que hablan de libertad y democracia y no la ponen en práctica. Y todos tenemos los mismos derechos. Los hispanos, las personas de color, los de quien sea. Y es vergonzoso que y cierro con esto.
Gracias.
Ahora voy a cerrar. Que los oficiales de HUD en Puerto Rico y los mismos del Departamento de la Vivienda asumen actitudes pusilánimes y cobardes para ejercer su función. Metan mano y levanten a la comunidad.
Gracias. The final bit was more about needing to protect and grow Section 3 and really urging our administrators who are working in HUD, in Puerto Rico, in DC, to really get in there and be brave and have courage to bring this program to the heights that it could reach. Yeah.
Lean el reglamento.
Okay, read the rules. Read
el
it.
reglamento ustedes y los que
Gracias.
quieren aplicarlo también para que aprendamos a defendernos.
Okay, saying read the rules so we can all be informed all the time. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it over to Sergio from NYCHA. That's a hard act to follow, Sergio, but good luck.
Muchas gracias. Con mucha pasión, señor. Yeah, sí. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sergio Paneque. I'm NYCHA's Chief Procurement Officer. Special thanks to Assemblywoman Septimo for inviting me today and organizing this special panel. I'm especially excited because I was born in Rio Piedra, Puerto Rico, and now I'm blessed to participate on this panel to further the economic opportunities for our residents. So many thanks to you all. And thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. So I got a quick presentation. I would like to say that, Mr. Martinez, you're holding us accountable every single day, and I thank you for that, sir, and everyone that's there representing NYCHA. What I'm going to talk about today is where we were, where we are, and where we're going. But I cannot thank enough Mr. Martinez for the courage that you have. I wish I was there, to be with you today, but I look forward to meeting up with you when you get back. Have a pina colada for me, please, sir. So if you could, first slide. Where we are. Because I cannot see on the screen. Let me get my deck up real quick. So first slide, where we were as an agency, and as you've heard Mr. Martinez and some of the other speakers, some of that was very incumbent within NYCHA as well. We had an antiquated contract procedure resolution. It was something that was developed in 1978. Rarely was it updated. It didn't include any diversity policies. It had no chief diversity officer. There was no dedicated unit within procurement. It was blended amongst all sorts of different parts of the organization. There was no compliance tool. It was all a paper-driven process. Conflate, confuse, really, not really reach the outcomes that our residents expect for us, like Mr. Martinez was saying, about leveraging those billions of dollars for those economic opportunities that they should, be benefiting from. There was no staff training or education. Nobody really understood, the importance of the Section 3 legal requirements, and just a lack of an overall strategic plan or approach with respect to procurement. Next slide, please, Jacqueline. I have to change my slides, I apologize. And then where are we now? We have a new procurement policy manual. It's written in plain English so that staff at NYCHA can understand exactly what's expected of them. That was originally released in 2021. It codified the S3BC and MWBE first policy for procurements under the simplified acquisition threshold. In other words, under 250,000, we could solicit directly to S3BCs first, and then obviously MWBEs in order to really target that pool for those opportunities. Now we have a dedicated diversity program section within that PPM. And we also codified, even though it existed in law, and it speaks to what a number of people have said here, there was a section of the law that wasn't even within the procurement manual, in particular with 963.10, that solicits contracts directly to resident-owned businesses up to $1 million. We have to grow that potential. So we codified that within the PPM. We appointed a CDO, and we have a distinct vendor diversity unit now within procurement to drive this change and this socialization. We have a dedicated diversity page on NYCHA's website, and obviously the inclusion of diversity criteria within RFP solicitations, 10% of which is important to that. And then now we're also we've launched eComply, which is a vendor diversity and labor compliance tool to make sure that we're capturing those requirements from solicitation through contract admin and compliance so that we get those promises that are incumbent in the law. And then again, everything is about education, training, and culture, both internal to NYCHA and external. In the last year, we've conducted 60 training sessions that have touched over 2,500 staff that are responsible for procurement, either at the neighborhood level or centrally. And then we've outreached to a number of existing vendors to ensure that they're registering within the new eComply registry so that they can see these opportunities, conducted those training sessions on new rules throughout the department. And again, publishing the rules and whatnot within NYCHA University. So when new employees come in, they're being educated right from the onset. And then we had our first hosted our speed networking event where we brought S3BCs together with our neighborhood administrators and those folks that are making many of those micro and small opportunities available to them at the point of the development. Next slide, please. We're also furthering our OEO, other economic opportunities. A lot of cases, professional services is a significant part of our spend at NYCHA, and yet we weren't realizing those benefits back into the residents. So we're amping up those OEO opportunities, and then further developing our REASE programs, in particular our Construction Business Pathways program, which I'll talk about in a second, in order to really create more Section 3 opportunities and businesses within NYCHA. Next slide. So going forward, there was a segment in the law, both in the PHL, the Public Housing Law 151 in New York State, as well as the CFR, that the agency wasn't taking advantage of, which was. Thank you. Do I still have time, Assemblywoman? I'm sorry.
No, please continue.
I do. Okay, thank you. It's my last slide.
About a minute.
Okay, good. So, in particular around PQLs, because there's a lot of restrictions for NYCHA that used to be a bit of an excuse around the sealed bids around Descartes. Mr. Martinez, you know this to be correct. Demolition, excavation, construction, alteration, and renovation, all those things would need to be by sealed bids. But to the extent that we can use PQLs on the front end and pre-qualified vendors, be able to create micro pools with MWBs and Section 3s, start to geographically manage how we're awarding contracts by the neighborhood, by the development. That's where we bring opportunities down to those dollars that will really make an impact. And also, again, use 963.10, more effectively. Furthering compliance and responsibility enforcement, not only the tool itself, but actually the terms and conditions on our contracts. And if a firm fails to meet those expectations, how does it have an impact on the responsibility determination? So not only can they not do business further with NYCHA, but it would have an impact to them doing business with any government. So that really is the teeth around the program. Peer agency reviews, taking a tiered approach to a mentorship program where we can grow using those PQLs, using those micro capabilities capabilities and grow Section 3 businesses from the training programs all the way through to hopefully creating multi-million-dollar businesses. And then the last thing is, because I think it's important now that we have the trust and pact, is continuing to engage with the trust, ensure that they're building a Section 3 and engineering a new Section 3 requirement at the point of solicitation, at the point of contract, and at the point of fulfilling those requirements. And given that the trust is a blank slate, it really gives a tremendous opportunity to also continue to further and advance economic opportunities for.
Thank you so much, Sergio.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. And we're going to sort of get to audience questions in just a minute. NYCHA just spoke at length about some of the sort of technical changes and the frameworks that have happened to their operations. But I'd love to ask our panelists here, I'd love to ask, so Section 3 has been on the books, right? It's been the rule. And for whatever reason, we've felt short of the mark in several ways over the years. And so I'd love to hear from you all the hard question of what is the thing that has been missing? Is it just the will? Is it just prioritizing? How do you get to a place from aspirational in terms of the goal to reality of this is how it happens? So I'd love to hear from the panelists. What are your thoughts on how you get to a place of realizing what's the thing that's missing?
So I'll start. I agree. Transparency. I also think transparency at the right time matters. Because transparency at the back end of a project, after a project is already completed, and then you've identified that there hasn't been the benchmark met, that there hasn't been the kind of movement that you expect to see, is probably too late. And so part of the conversation we want to start having in terms of what's different today, because I acknowledge and I respect the fact that something must be different today. I also acknowledge and I appreciate the fact that that's why I'm here. Part of our approach is engaging directly with the people who are actually touching, feeling, doing the programs, the people who have the feedback to offer. And what we know is looking at the numbers on the back end isn't going to get us to better outcomes. So how do we look at the numbers on the front end? But how do we create an environment that facilitates the opportunities with all of the practical players on the table? Let me make an example. HUD didn't get very much money from IRA, Bill, NYCHA, all those Build Back Better programs. We were fighting. The secretary was prone to say, housing is infrastructure, but we didn't get money. The powers that be in Congress made other decisions. Nonetheless, if all these other people got money, if Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, got all this money to do all this work, how are we, as the Deputy Secretary says often, getting access to other people's money that directly benefit the constituencies that we all mutually serve? I'll give you an example specifically. Department of Labor has a whole bunch of money with respect to infrastructure, roads. What they also require, which is also not commonly known, is the fact that for many of their programs, there are local hire requirements. So partnering with the Department of Transportation at the regional level, at the local office level, that's the expectation, the accountability that I have of every one of my 64 field office directors to get to know your DOT counterpart and get a listing of all of the projects and all of the investments so that when we talk to community, we can say, and here they are. And when they're drafting their notice for funding opportunities and they're seeking folks to bid on them, that we have articulated in the notice of funding availability that housing authorities and otherwise eligible Section 3 applicants are built into their program requirements, because it's not just enough that they do it in HUD programs. It's all federal money. It's all federal money. Department of Energy has a whole bunch of money around weatherization. We were talking about lead-based paint. Well, if we're talking about in Puerto Rico specifically, New York, resiliency, climate sustainability, then we have to talk about ensuring that when we are in fact building, that the properties are able to withstand and protect the whole definition of shelter, no? And in that instance, Department of Energy has a whole bunch of money to pay for training and certification for weatherization. And guess what? That's a green job that has a complete career ladder for the future of green building in this nation. We are partnering with the Department of Energy. Last year, 5 locations in a pilot. We're going to do 25 this year across the country to identify housing authorities and jobs plus programs where we just simply line up who wants a green job, and we get the money from the community action agencies. They're paid for training, and then they're placed in a job. The same thing we're doing with lead-based paint abatement. I'll tell you this, last point. Lead-based paint abatement. We found a concern in the Office of, I always get this name wrong, Lead Hazard Control in Healthy Homes is the name of the office at HUD. And because of the pandemic, there was a whole bunch of money on the table that potentially could have been returned to the Treasury because they didn't find enough vendors and contractors to contract with. That's not acceptable, because for every dollar in that program, that is a unit, a housing unit of a family that needs lead-based paint abated. And so we did training, education, and outreach locally across the country that identifies how to train. EPA has the money. I'm telling you right now, EPA has the money. How do we identify where the money is, where the training certification is, and how do we matchmake? And yes, we did that. We actually invited all of the vendors who got the certification and trained the workers to the community for them to talk, right? We're not telling them how to contract, that's within local control, but we are saying, here's a pool of eligible contractors to be able to do work that we know you need help with. Mm-hmm. This is how government can come to the table a little bit differently. That's how we're trying to do it differently.
Thank you. I want to hear more on that from other panelists as well, because that was wonderful. But I really briefly want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Assemblymember Harvey Epstein from Manhattan, who does incredible work in advocacy for public housing. Thank you for being here, Harvey. And so I'd love to hear from other panelists' thoughts on how do we do better, what's missing?
So, I want to go back to the idea of transparency and simplicity. You can hear a government official talk, and a river of acronyms comes out, right? And I couldn't even understand some of the stuff that's being said. And I'm commissioner of housing for 22 months in New York City, and I've banned acronyms. So yeah, it's like ridiculous. It's insider speak. Insider speak. I don't know what a PPL is, and our brother Sergio is going to have to tell me later. I'm just kidding. I know what it is after 22 months. But so in that spirit of simplicity and transparency, I think a lot of government programs start with good, sincere intentions. There was a reckoning in the United States in 1968. By God, I thought we would have advanced so much further by our lifetime and today, and look at how we've backslid in so many ways. But the intent was there, and what we fail with is the execution. How do you, Manny brought it up, Roberto brought it up. How do you get this done if people don't know about it? If people don't know about the opportunity, if they do have knowledge of the opportunity, but we make it very difficult and convoluted and complicated to do business with us. So I have a to-do list that I want to share real quick with our partners. And you all know I worked at HUD too as regional administrator, so it's for my former colleagues. HUD should expand support for the participants to easily identify and contract with Section 3 businesses and workers. And I know Sister Michelle talked a little bit about efforts in that regard. HUD should expand the registry to include businesses and workers. I want to just point out one more thing. We should fund Section 3 workforce readiness and support programs to make workers employment ready. We can tell people about the opportunity, but if they're not ready to seize it, they're not going to catch it. So, and it's true of the small business. There are Section 3 businesses that we say we want to engage with, but it is so difficult for them to comply, to monitor, to report. They don't have the capacity, the infrastructure. We need to make it easy to do business with us. If you take away anything that Adolfo said today, was transparency education, keep it simple, make it user-friendly, customer-friendly. Yes, you're right. You're right. Public housing authorities would not exist without the tenants.
Yes. Amen to that.
So that's who we work for, and that's how it should be.
Okay. I would love to open it to questions in the audience now. Sure. We've got one. And if you could just tell us your name, where you're from.
Ronald Topping, South Bronx. I'm president of Adam Houses, community activist, and former social worker. I'm going to begin with, first of all, I thank you, Amanda, for having this. This is very important. I thank all of you panelists for giving us the information that is desperately needed. And thank you for saying what you said, even though she was translating back here. Yes, one of the problems that I see, if you had to look at what all the particulars are and problems are, the first thing that comes to my mind is a password would be discrimination is what we're dealing with. Okay, secondly, with contracting of trainings, it's not being fulfilled to its full widest potential. You have the policies that are already written in the books, but it's not being followed. We are the IG's investigators. That's what we need. We also need to stop this PLA that actually affects us, which also is another form of discrimination, to keep us out. If you don't educate the community perishes.
Tell them what a PLA is. It's another acronym.
Yeah.
Project Lead.
And I'm sorry about the acronym.
Gotcha.
So let me just distract that. PLA is the Project Labor Agreement. And a lot of mayors have also incorporated that, which actually gives the other people a chance to work and not keep out the residents. The businesses, portions of the NYCHA residents, should be a part of this, as well as residents who are not. Well, what I say to HUD, rather than just saying an upgrade and a revisal, because you know how long ago things were put back in the book, we need to take a look at doing something like A. Philip Randolph said, is at a banquet, there are no reserved seats. But what we need to do is take what we can, get what we want, and hold on to it, and you can't do that unless you're organized. So that is the way we bring this back together. We reach out to all communities and make sure that people understand. Just because you speak a different language does not mean you don't have the same need or the understanding. The only way we make this thing spin is we pull it together and organize. The power is not in the money in the capitalistic society that we live. It's in the people.
Amen. All right. I want to give Clem an opportunity to come up and say something. He's going to project.
The reality is, studying this Section 3 for the last year, looking at reading documents, talking to people. Listen, this is tax dollars. These are tax dollars. These are your money. This is your money. This is your money. You should make sure it's spent properly. Don't leave this room and forget Section 3. How different would New York look right now if that $1 billion in the last 10 years had gone to pay somebody $25 an hour to learn how to be an electrician? How different would these kids' lives be because their parents are working? How different would the schools in those communities be because they had parents who had money, who were going to be more cultural, more refined, yet had an opportunity to be more and give more to their kids? New York is where it is today because, in part, because this money wasn't spent the way it should. Please pay attention. Please go back to your respective communities and make sure, talk to your politicians about Section 3. Help them change what we need to get this done and get more people working. Please.
Thank you. Other questions?
Piggyback on that. Our president right now is struggling with black people and Latinos. He's going to be coming wherever we are to ask for our vote. Now is the time to leverage our electeds, who he's going to come to say, I need your support, to say, if you want my support, you need to enforce Section 3, properly fund it, etc. So that now is the time to really think about the larger political atmosphere on how we can get the federal government to move on this versus our state government.
Sure, thank you. Any questions? Burning questions? I'm going to go back in the back here. Question?
Yes, excellent panel.
Thank you.
I'm a proud resident, or former resident of public housing, surrounding projects in the Bronx.
Great.
But I wanted to say, with regard to the equity plan, that's going to be a key document because you have so much of a burden to execute. I'm just interested in being able to make sure that as a minority-owned business, that was formerly Section 3, but is at risk of being Section 3 again, because of the lack of opportunities, that document is going to echo throughout the whole country in terms of how you do it. So I hope that as you're looking at that you're able to get input from some of the advocates.
Can I respond just to 2 seconds? One of the things that we learned, we actually met with Section 3 companies as part of the analysis within my first 6 months on the job. And the biggest challenge that they said they had was bonding, insurance, legal assistance, and ultimately notification and awareness when the HUD-funded agencies were going into procurement. Those are two different issues. The first one, though, bonding, insurance, capital investment, HUD's not an expert in that. We can't provide you support, but you know who is? VSBA. You know who is? The Minority Business Development Administration over at the U.S. Department of Commerce. And so we are currently in the midst of their equity action plan and our action plan, identifying what is the strategy that are we going to use to bring the resources to bear from the MBDA, Minority Business Development Administration, and the Small Business Administration, so that the Section 3 businesses or future businesses can access it. My dream of what this could be, which is what we built in the first equity plan, which is available online at hud.gov/equity, is that the Section 3 business comes to a point where it becomes an AA business, which it actually can compete for government contracts, not just housing authority contracts. We're treating this as if it's not part of a larger pipeline. There is a potential trajectory that if we do this right, we can capitalize on the momentum. So I appreciate your feedback.
When we do it right, not if.
Oh, did I say that? No. I take it back. I take it back if that's what came out of my mouth.
Do you want to go ahead with your question?
All right. My name is Carmen Quinones, and I'm the president of Douglas Houses. And I have done more OSHA classes, safety classes, and gotten a lot of my young residents to work. But I think what we need to look at is Section 3 to bring it where you gotta meet us halfway, especially in housing. Them kids will not go from one development to another development. We got issues. So in order for y'all to meet us, right, you gotta bring it to us. Right? I have to take my TPA funds and pay for that. Before even Reese came out, I started that. As soon as I started doing that, then Reese came out with it. OSHA 30 and all that. They took it from me. And that's okay, because I'm occupying NYCHA. But you gotta meet us halfway. HUD definitely, listen, I'm glad that you came. But your
As are we.
She don't take calls and she don't do nothing with it.
We're getting political. I want to go to the back.
Because she has to meet us halfway. How are we going to work with HUD if HUD doesn't want to work with us?
Okay. We hear you. Thank you so much. To the back. I'm going to go to the back. Yeah. To him. I'll come back. Yeah.
First and foremost, I do want to applaud NYCHA in regards to using Section 3 because I do believe this is a great program to help with the disparity within the disparity. My name is Jose Rosales. I'm with RMG. We're CPAs. One of the big issues that we have, and we were actually bidding for a proposal, is finding qualified firms, right, that were Section 3 firms. When we looked at the list, pretty much the two businesses that were there were either already out of business or just didn't exist.
Okay.
When we started trying to identify, okay, well, if we can't find the actual firms, can we find the Section 3 workers? So we started speaking with, let's say, the universities, right, in New York City. And when we started speaking to universities, it was the first time they were like, Section 3, talk to me about this. I'm like, man, I'm the first person to talk to you about this. So what is being done to be able to help even our students? I know we're talking about blue collar, but even in professional services, to start giving them the advantage to know, hey, how can we identify you as a Section 3 worker? Because even my firm, when we're starting to look for them as a Section 3 worker, it shouldn't be so difficult that it's like we're starting the conversation. It should already be done. So what is being done to already have those conversations? So our students are already aware of this, whether in law or CPAs like myself or otherwise. Thank you.
Who wants to take that? Great question. I'm just going to let him get an answer first to his question. Sure.
Okay. I'll say two things. One is the database that you made reference to earlier. One of the first things I saw when I got into the role in February of 2021, I said, show me the database. And they showed me the database, the Section 3 Spears business opportunity portal, right? The number of workers. And I said, can you tell me how many hits this database has had in the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and year? And then can you tell me how much money we've spent building this system, maintaining this system? And what outcomes, do we actually have any outcome measures that can track the people who are on it with the actual jobs that they got? So if we can't do any of that with a system, then it's not much worth a damn, right? So we need to reorient ourselves to what are the systems that work. And that's an organization to organization relationship, which is why HUD anyway is spending time sitting together with the housing authorities and with the entitlements to say, the cities, the counties, the states, to say, do you know who the community is? And if you don't, let's go find them. That's part of the relationship with Section, the SBA, because I asked them how many people apply for 8A and how many don't get it, because it's a mountain to climb to that. And that's a complete pool that we could do. So that's one. On the universities, I would tell you we've entered into a memorandum of understanding with Campus Compact. Campus Compact is a combination of city and metropolitan area universities, HBCUs, HSIs, historically black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, who have anchor institutions in the communities that we all live. And the question is, how are they holding themselves accountable? We talked about SBA and getting them legal assistance for a small business. Well, that's what the university can do. We're talking about students. You know how many students are homeless? Do we know that the reality between HUD assistance and the attendance of university students are in many cases one and the same? So having those relationships from a place-based orientation and bringing all the parties to the table, again, is what our field offices are positioned to do. So get in touch with your field office director.
But thank you for that question, because it sounds like it's a breakdown in the system that they're working on fixing, but not maybe all the way there yet. I think we only have time for one more question, so I am going to move on. I'm going to go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you for doing this panel, for having a resident leader who people respect, and for having our voices. My biggest fight since I've been resident president of Alfred E. Smith Housing and now CCOP member is that we, the residents, can speak for ourselves, and that we have leadership. And just for the record, public housing has produced some of the most responsible leaders in this country. Supreme Court Justice, we have somebody who's planning the education, UFT leaders.
We only have 1 minute left.
Right, all of this with public housing. So I just wanted to thank you. Our biggest question, my question is, how do we proceed? We, the leaders, all these, because it was a fight to get here with us.
I heard. I'm sorry.
Not her fault. Not her fault. She's on our team.
That's all right. I'm receiving it. I receive it and I accept it, and I'm sorry.
We would like to meet with you and have a conversation, because there are presidents all over here and in the room and watching, because I actually zoomed in so that they could watch even if they're in New York to hear you. When can you meet with us when it comes to this, especially on Section 3? Because most of us have some kind of connection, and we have contractors that are all over our place, and we are totally blind.
We are happy to help facilitate continued conversations, and we're right at time. But I want to say thank you also, by the way, to Edna Handy, who played a major role in pulling this together. If we could give her a round of applause. That was an oversight on my end, and I'm sorry about that. But I want to say thank you to all of the panelists, spectacular panel. I want to give you all a round of applause, please, for these incredible experts. This has been a wonderful panel, and really it's the start of so many great conversations that I know will continue. We're going to come back here in a year and talk about the progress we've made on Section 3. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you, everyone.